Alrighty, welcome back everybody to the 23rd week of our Tech Bytes JavaScript session. We have made it on towards the 5 and almost 6 month mark. Crazy to think how fast time has flown by. We are already 5 months and 3 weeks in. In case you are coming back from our web development course, welcome back to the 15th week of our web dev course. As always, love seeing you guys out here. And we got a lot of fun, a lot of more working to do with our Hangman project. But without any further ado, let's get to it. All right, guys, if you don't know who I am already, my name is Rayan Siddiqui. I'm a senior at James B. Conant High School here in the Schaumburg area. I left to code, made multiple apps for the App Store, made a dozen different websites, like doing different stuff outside of coding, making an impact as well, and really like making content as well, whether it be running a sports talk show on YouTube with some of my friends called Buzzer to Buzzer, writing some articles for the internet, or just doing some content creation type stuff, making some videos from my YouTube channel as well. But yeah, if you want to learn more about me, what I have been up to for the past couple of days, you can check me out at my website at rayansiddiqui.com. Alrighty, so now let's get down towards our agenda for today. That being the first thing, we're going to get started off with our daily fun fact relating to programming language, which we are studying too. Something cool going on around in the real world. If you remember from last week, we talked about how the programming language of JavaScript was related to the election and all that good stuff we talked about last week, relating how we can check on real-time results with the help of JavaScript. Something pretty cool. If you want to learn more about it, you can definitely check out the YouTube channel with all of our videos. Then, guys, we're going to head on over talking about our Hangman project, which we have been working on for the past almost 4 weeks now, I believe, making a lot of progress on that as well. Then we're going to go over the code we wrote last week and transition into the code we will be writing this week. And without any further ado, we'll be coding that as well. So how about we, first of all, just a quick reminder that our old sessions are available at the Schaumburg Library's YouTube channel. Head on over to the playlist tab and then just click on the Tech Bytes playlist and you can find all of our content going back almost now the past 6 months. If you have any trouble finding it, I can definitely get you the link. It is also available in our Google Classroom. Once again, if you're not already in our Google Classroom, please let me know in the chat so I can give you the code. That is where you can find all of our resources, including code templates, pictures of code. All of our YouTube videos are linked there as well. Just a nice area for you to be involved in. So do let me know if you're not already there. But how about we transition today into our cool JavaScript fun fact of the day. That being that the National Football League, aka the NFL, uses JavaScript in order to provide us scores each week. Now, in case you don't know much about sports, the NFL is the football league in the US. There's 2 different conferences going on. We got the AFC and the NFC. We got a really good season going on right now, heading over to the 10th season in the NFL next week, actually. And I'm saying today is that with the programming language of JavaScript, we are able to receive updated scores each week. So if we head on over to the NFL website, which we'll do in a little bit, we can see the scores being updated in real time. Now you're probably thinking that, wait, this idea is a similar concept to what we talked about with the election last week. We talked about how we're able to receive real-time updates through the election and how databases are linked with the programming language of JavaScript. Well, the way in which the NFL is able to provide us live updates for games like our hometown team, the Bears, let's not talk about that right now after these last 3 consecutive losses in a row. But how about we talk about something a bit more happier and something I like a bit more right now, that being how JavaScript allows us to receive those scores. That being, remember we talked about this thing called Node.js, and we talked about it multiple times, whether it be how it can allow us to control a car, receive updates with our phone, and all those cool things. Well, Node.js, a JavaScript framework, allows for the NFL to update their scores whenever, say, Nick Foles, if he can throw a touchdown for once. Hopefully we can score more than 17 points every game, right? But with Node.js and JavaScript, guys, we are able to link with a database which allows us to receive real-time scores and allows us to keep a track of the game. So if I head on over to Google right now and I just search up NFL scores from last week, since the 9th week of the 2020 NFL season has elapsed, we're not going to be finding any live scores right now. But say I was watching the Bears game and I was on this tab right now, this score would be updating live, and the way that is possible is because of our language we are studying, that being JavaScript. I see Bahadra has raised her hand. As always, guys, if you got anything to say, love hearing what you guys have to say, drop it in the chat. You can either ask it through the question and answer feature, or you can just privately message me, whichever you prefer. But yeah, so if regardless of whatever website you use, maybe you might use ESPN, you might use Google, or the NFL.com website. All three ways use the same method of updating scores with JavaScript and Node.js. At the end of the day, we're able to see our Bears lose their third game because of it. But hey, there's a bunch of other cool games going on as well. Alrighty, so that is our JavaScript fact of the day. Looks like we got a question. Yes, for sure. Yep, the Google Classroom code. I will put it up right now. In case you are in a similar boat, guys, please join our classroom. It is very, very helpful. Here is the code, Badra. Here you go. Let me know once you got it, and we can move on. And in the chat, there is a link to directly join the classroom as well. All right. All right, so guys, how about now we start talking about our Hangman project, which we have been working on for the past almost month. It's one of our most sophisticated and I would say our most difficult project, which we have programmed up to this point. And you might ask why? Well, it's because we have been doing a lot of cool projects building up to this point, and now we have reached that point where we can apply our skills to something bigger. All right, no problem. Yep, awesome. And because of it, we're now able to make a cool project like Hangman, and we did a lot of coding last week as well. And as always, guys, the basic idea with our Hangman game is that it's a guessing the word game. We input some letters anywhere from A through Z, and the computer is going to tell us if we guessed the computer chosen word correctly. So say the computer word randomly chosen is the sport basketball, right? The word basketball got 10 letters inside of it. And if I guess the letter A, then the letter A should appear correctly and the underscore should be replaced. That was something we worked on last week. And eventually our goal is to guess the whole word. And the core concepts, guys, once again, which we are utilizing with our Hangman project are variables, functions, loops, parameters, if else's. And last week we used a bunch of substringing in order to be able to extract a certain piece of the word we are guessing and compare it in order to check if we were making a correct guess or a correct guess with our letter. And talking about last week, the code, guys, officially, which we did do last week, was that idea of the user being able to guess a letter and see if the letter they guessed matched any of the letters in the computer chosen word. Like I mentioned, say we got the word basketball and the user, like myself, I inputted the letter A. Then we should see that blank underscore. So say I got the word basketball, right? We usually have underscores representing that those are letters I still need to guess. We would then see the second space, because that's where the letter A goes, fill up with the letter A because I correctly guessed it. This concept involved a lot of substringing, and it was one of the most difficult concepts we have coded, but we indeed got through it. And this week, we'll be moving on to something a bit more, just making the game polished, making it a bit better, adding some more functionality as well. And that being that this week, we're going to be adding some limits as to how many times the user can guess a word. We can decide on how many times do we think is fair, maybe 7 or 8 attempts, checking for a valid user input, and also checking if the user has working our way towards to see if the user has guessed the full word. So with that in mind, the code which we will be utilizing today is not as crazy as last week's multiple for loops and a substringing. This week, like I said, is a bit more simpler. We're going to be using some if-else statements in order to check how many times the user has incorrectly guessed a letter, and then displaying that with our HTML as well. But also, we're going to be checking to see if the user input is valid. So like, did the user input a lowercase letter and that stuff? And we're going to be using some built-in functions in JavaScript, such as dot to lowercase, which makes our lives much easier. So with all that in mind, guys, how about we head on over to our JavaScript coding website. As always, the link towards our code can be found in the Google Classroom, but I will also be dropping it in the chat for your guys' convenience. Here you go. There it is. And I'll give everybody a couple minutes to get on, and we'll get started. All right, and once everybody is on our JavaScript website, please let me know in the chat so we can get started. All right. So guys, to start off, I'm just going to go over what we worked on last week, that being the feature in which we're able to guess a letter and see that letter appear in the correct position if we guess the right letter. So say I guess the letter A, hopefully it's there. Nope. So let's try maybe the word is hockey. Nope. Basketball, there's no B. Is there an E? There we go. Okay, so it looks like the word is soccer. So now I can guess letters and see them appear in the correct position, and say a letter occurs more than once in a word. We, like the word soccer has two C's inside of it. We can see both those C's getting filled up. And the way that was possible was through this sophisticated code we wrote last week, involving two for loops in which we were substringing and comparing each letter which the user has already guessed to all the letters in the word which the computer has chosen. So now if I go ahead, I can even guess the whole word, but you'll probably see that nothing happens. Like, I've guessed the whole word. We're not being told that, hey, you guessed the word correctly. So that is something which we'll be working on today. But firstly, how about we get started off with checking out if the user has correctly guessed the letter, or if not, then we're going to have to change our HTML and show that, hey, you guessed the letter incorrectly. That's +1. And that usually is going to represent, you know, how in Hangman you can draw like a head, then the stick body and all that. Since we can't really show images in this online website, what we're going to do is just keep track of the number of incorrect guesses with some variables. So in order to do that, guys, I'm just going to hit run, refresh my page. So let's think about this. So right now what we have going on is that we got two for loops in which we're checking if the letter the user has entered compares correctly to any of the letters inside the computer word. Now we could use some if statement inside of here to check, like right now we already got some if statement right here, checking if the user has entered a letter which is valid, meaning if the letter is also appearing in the computer chosen word. However, the thing is, if we try to run some code here, and how about actually we try? So if I use a variable to check for and keep track of how many incorrect guesses the user has, then we're going to see our number not be what we expect it to be. So if I just create a global variable called var user number of guesses, initialize that with 0 because the user has not made any guesses when the game starts. And actually what I'm going to call it is user number of incorrect guesses, because that is what we're keeping track of. You call it whatever you'd like. So with that, if I go right here and we have this code running right with this if statement, that if the user guessed a correct letter, then we would fill that letter in and replace the underscore, aka the blank space. And then if not, then we just keep the word going, add another blank space to represent that the user did not correctly guess the letter. So it would seem logical if I just enter the variable and increase the variable value by 1, like such. That representing that whenever the user guessed a letter incorrectly, the number of times they've guessed incorrectly, that variable holding that value goes up by 1. However, how about we, at the end of our for loop, so going outside of the squiggly brackets representing my for loop, how about I change this element, using the DOM, the document object model, change my HTML, and let's see what is being printed out. So if I do document that long line of code, document.element, get element by ID, open and close parentheses, add those quotation marks, whatever you call your ID for the number of tries we're keeping track of, paste that in there, and then dot inner HTML equals representing number of incorrect guesses. And I'm going to change this HTML also to number of incorrect guesses. And then add a plus sign to represent we are connecting two strings, plus, and then the variable keeping track of how many wrong guesses the user has. That's a long line of code. Give everybody a quick minute to catch up. Again, we're just adding a line of a variable, which is going to keep track of the number of incorrect guesses the user has. And then we're going to be using the DOM in order to show how many incorrect guesses through the HTML. All right. So now, guys, if I say enter an incorrect letter, this may, okay, so A was not in the computer word. So if I entered an incorrect letter, for some reason, we're being told that the number of incorrect guesses is already 6. Why could that be happening? Why am I being told that this variable, so say I enter like the letter Z, which is in none of the words, then we're being told we've guessed 12 times incorrectly, but we've only guessed twice. Does anybody have an idea as to why that could be happening? Why is our variable increasing by so much? I'll give you guys a little hint. It could be something to do with our for loops. Anybody have an idea? You could privately chat me. No idea is a bad idea, guys. Yep, exactly. Suhas, right on the dot. So Suhas is telling us, guys, that right now what the program is doing is that it's multiplying how many guesses we have. So like 1 incorrect guess, multiplying it by 6 to give us 6. 2 incorrect guesses, multiplying that by 6 to get us 12 incorrect guesses. And that's spot on. And the reason why that is happening, Suhas, is because we have our for loops, which are running X amount of times. In this case, looks like since our computer chosen word is 6 letters long, aka it has a length of 6 units. So essentially there's 6 letters, meaning it's 6 letters long, right? So since it's 6 letters long, our this if statement is going to execute 6 times, meaning this variable keeping track of how many incorrect guesses the user has is going to be 6 times what we expect it to be. So that's a bit weird to say the least. So say I enter a correct letter. There's our number. It seems like that our an incorrect number tracker is still going up. And now that gets even a bit more confusing. And the main reason is that, guys, is whenever we try to have a Boolean inside of a for loop, it's always a bit risky because you never know if the Boolean is going to turn to the other value by the end. So in order to compensate and not have to deal with all of that, we're going to create a separate for loop checking if the user just entered a correct letter. And through using that, we're just going to check if the user entered an incorrect letter, then we're going to increase the counter by 1. So what I'm going to do is just, you can delete that line of code inside of our else statement. And I'm going to go outside of the scope of the first for loop. And then I'm going to type out a new for loop. And the purpose of this for loop is just going to be to see if user entered any incorrect letters. So in order to keep track of this, what I'm going to do is instead of using a double for loop like we have up here, we got a for loop inside of a for loop, hence a nested for loop in a sense. But this time, I'm just going to use one for loop and check if the user has entered a correct letter and nothing much more. So what I'm going to do is firstly create a variable a Boolean variable. We can call it correct letter and set that equal to false for now. And now what I'm going to do is create a for loop. So we can do for var, we can do w equals 0. W is going to be less than the length of the computer chosen word. So computer word dot length. Remember, dot length allows us to see how long a certain string is. So like the word basketball, it has 10 letters. Hence, it has a length of 10 letters. And then we're going to increment our for loop by 1. So w plus plus, add those squiggly brackets, tab inside. Give everybody a minute to catch up. And now, instead of me checking to see if the user guessed if any of the previous letters the user has guessed compare to any of the letters inside of the computer word, I'm just going to do one if statement, checking if the user guess, which we have in a variable called user current letter guess, is equal to any of the letters in the computer. So I'm going to do is computer word. So this goes back to an idea we talked about heavily last week. I talked about it earlier today as well. What's the main concept which we talked about last week? How are we able to extract certain letters in order to compare and see if the user entered a correct guess? Anybody have an idea? Drop in the chat. How were we able to extract a certain amount of letters from a word? And that is going to be something which we're going to be using right now. Anybody remember the term, the concept called? Exactly. Suhas on a streak today, man. Nice. That is correct. Suhas said substringing, guys, and that is absolutely correct. Remember, the idea of substring is for us to say have a word like bat, and if I just want to extract the letter A and T, I can use substring at those certain indexes in order to grab those two letters, and that's something which we talked about a bunch last week, and it's how we were able to compare and see if the user, any of the previous letters the user has guessed, compared correctly to any of the letters inside the computer word. So that's going to be what I'm going to be doing right now, checking if the user's current letter guessed is equal to any of the letters inside of the computer's word. And the way we're going to do that is substring from the current index to the next index in order to just make sure we're comparing one singular letter. Then add your squiggly brackets inside of the for loop in order to match up for the if statement. And now, if, guys, any of the letters we have entered are correct, I'm just going to change my Boolean correct letter to true, like such. So now, since we have already set it to true, we don't have to worry about setting it to false, because you see, every time this submit letter function is ran, the value of our correct letter variable, Boolean variable, is going to reset every time. So that makes sure that the value of our variable at the end, when the user has guessed their letter, is accurate and not incorrect. And now, guys, we are able to keep track of if the user has guessed a correct or incorrect letter each time. And now, using this, we can do some manipulation. We can start keeping track of how many incorrect guesses they have. So what I'm going to do is just copy this variable we got for the user number of incorrect guesses. Oh, all right. And what I'm going to do is go outside of the for loop we just wrote and tab a bit down. And what I'm going to do is if the user did not guess a correct letter. So there's two ways I can do this, right? This if statement, I can either do the shorthand method. So if exclamation mark, correct letter. Remember, this exclamation mark is telling us if the value of our Boolean variable is false, then run some code. Or I could do the longhand method and just say correct letter is equal to false. Both are perfectly acceptable, whatever you prefer. So if the user has guessed an incorrect letter, that means that we have to increase the value of the number of incorrect guesses they have by 1. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Get your variable, which is keeping track of those incorrect guesses, and increment that by 1. Once again, we have a shorthand method. We could just do plus equal 1, which means that, hey, increase the same variable by 1 from the previous value. So if, say, it's at a 4 right now, increase it by 1, so it goes to 5. Or you could do the longhand method, the variable equals the variable plus 1. What do you prefer? So I'll do the shorthand method for this, so plus equals 1 like such. And now we can manipulate our HTML using the DOM in order to show how many incorrect guesses we have. And the way we're going to do that is I'm just going to take this line of code we wrote earlier, copy that, or you could just move that if you'd like. Copy that document.getElementById statement and paste that inside of here. And this will allow for our HTML to be manipulated and changed to show and reflect the current number of incorrect guesses we have. Give everybody a minute to catch up, and then we'll run it. Alrighty. So now, guys, if I hit run, so I think there's probably letter A in here. Yep. Oh, looks like we are getting something incorrectly. So it looks like we entered a correct letter. However, our program is telling us that we incorrectly, we have an incorrect guess. That is interesting. Let's take a look why. So if we guess a letter, such as the letter B, it is keeping track. That is weird. Let's see. Are we using our variable somewhere else as well? Let me just check this out. Oh. All right, so that is a bit interesting. This should work. So let's see. Okay, so we are checking that if, oh, okay, I see the reason why. A silly typo I made right here. You see, I'm declaring the variable which is going to keep track of our Boolean increments, essentially the letter. I'm using the variable W, but since I'm so used to using the letter X, I forgot and named it X. Make sure you don't make the same mistake and put the letter W. Make sure that all the letters in your for loop statement are the same. Don't make that mistake. And now, if I run it, hopefully you should see the correct code run. So now if I enter the letter A is inside of there, then we still have 0 incorrect guesses. So it looks like the word is basketball. So I'll do like the letter Z. Then we see the number of incorrect guesses we have is incremented and going up. If I enter the letter P now, that's not in there as well. Our incorrect guesses go up as well. There we go. All right, so now we are able to keep track of how many incorrect guesses the user has made. But how about we add a feature in which if the user has made, say, how about 8 guesses should be a fair amount. If the user has made 8 incorrect guesses, then what we're going to do is end the game. So this is going to be a bit more of a simpler logical part we're doing for the game. That being that if we're just going to check if the number of guesses is either equal to or greater than 8. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is copy our variable, which is holding the number of incorrect guesses we have, and say if the number of incorrect guesses the user has is greater than or equal to, so the greater than or equal to symbol, then 8, then we can just alert you lost, or something of that sort. So we can tell that the user is going to lose, but right now we're just alerting out that the user lost. How about we actually manipulate our HTML and show some text if the user has lost the game? So what I'm going to do is change, actually what we can do is just copy this line, paste it down here, and instead of displaying how many incorrect guesses the user has, we can just display that, hey, you have lost. So just write you have lost, something like that. Yes, Suhas, you'll be getting towards winning as well. after you finish this losing part aspect. Thank you for asking. All right, so if the user has more than 8 guesses, then they have lost the game. And now usually, guys, what happens is that once the user loses, then they should be able to see the word which they were guessing, right? So what I'm going to do is go down here and grab and replace the number tries ID with the word display. And what I'm going to do is just change the text which is displayed to correct word was colon, and then we can just do a plus and display the computer word like such. So now if I go ahead and run this game, purposely lose, so if I guess the letter Z, and if I keep on guessing it, this is a feature which we'll take care of later so that you're not able to do this, what I'm doing right now. But this is something for later, probably next week we can do. Now, if I have 8, there we go. We see that we have lost the game. And it looks like that our HTML did not update. And the reason for that is because we are updating that same tag at the end. So what I'm going to do is just copy that last line and move it on up towards after our for loop like such. And now I'm going to hit run, guys. Guess our incorrect letter multiple times, and there we go. We see that we have lost the game, and we are told what the correct word was as well. Once again, we just manipulated our HTML, changed what our tag was holding, and showed some little endgame elements, such as you have lost and the correct word. All right, so now that we have finished that, how about we talk about what happens if the user has guessed the correct word? So we talked about how the user can lose, but now we have to think about if the user has guessed a correct word. So now if I go ahead and like say I hit run. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Suhas, we can definitely say that you have won. But first we have to talk about how we can detect if the user has won. So say the word I think is basketball. So say the user correctly guesses the word. Right now, you will notice that nothing is happening if the whole word is filled out. So if I guess the word correctly, voila. But nothing is really happening. You see, we're able to guess the whole word, but we're not able to see the, hey, you have won or anything of that sort. Now, this is something which is going to be a bit different to how we've been doing our losing, keeping track of how many times the user has guessed an incorrect letter, because we're not going to be using a for loop in the same sense, but still we will be able to use and potentially reuse this for loop. So if we think about it right now, what we're doing, this for loop is just checking if a letter we have guessed matches up to any of the letters the computer has guessed. But the for loop we have written right here, the double for loop, this is the real deal. This is essentially checking for any, making sure that all the letters we have guessed match up to all the letters which the computer has guessed as well. So now, how about we do something? Say I've guessed the whole word correctly. How about we just output it and see what is printed out to us? So now, if I just go towards the end right here, and we can just log it out. So console.log word variable. And then we can just do plus word display, I believe. Our whole display, the variable name is. And let's see what is being printed out. Give everybody a minute to catch up. All right, so now if I guess a letter, like the letter basketball once again. Oh, it just refreshed on me, there we go. We see that if I go down here, we are being told what we have guessed, but there are these weird spaces, looks like, in between our word, which is going to make comparing to see if the word we've guessed a bit more difficult. So this concept is going to be a bit more complex and something I want to hold off on for next week because that's going to require a bit more code and something different, which we will be doing next week. So next week, we'll be talking about implementing some code which allows the user to see if they have won the game. And next week, we're also going to be adding some reset functionality to our Hangman project. But for this week, the main focus was checking if the user has guessed a letter and checking if they have increasing their incorrect guesses counter. And one last thing which we can end off with today is making sure that the letter the user has guessed is a correct letter. Meaning right now, if I hit run and I input, say, a capital letter A, that doesn't work. But if I enter a lowercase letter a, that works. So what we want to do is make sure that we convert whatever letter the user has guessed to the lowercase version of it. And in order to do that, you're definitely Suhas. Yep, that's something which we can also work on. Make sure that we can only enter a letter, one letter at a time. So I can enter two letters at the same time. And also making it so that I can't enter the same letter again. That is something which we can also work on in the coming weeks as well. So firstly, how about we do something where the user, whatever the letter they write, regardless of whether it's the capital version, we just make it into the lowercase version. So we have something in JavaScript which allows our lives to be very easier. And Abraham, exactly, yep, you got the right idea. We're going to be using something called .lowercase. So what I'm going to do is wherever the user is entering their letter, looks like right here. So user current letter guess right here. What I'm going to do is say the user current letter guess equals the same value, aka whatever the user's inputted, but dot to lowercase. And then add those open and closed parentheses at the end, like such. And through this little one line of code, guys, we're able to make sure that the letter the user has entered is converted to its lowercase form. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the C in case is capitalized. So make sure you do that as well. And now, guys, if I hit run, if I input a big A, looks like the letter A is not in here. So it might be the word soccer. If I'm right, maybe not the word soccer. Is it hockey? Okay, it's hockey. So if I now enter the letter K, we know we should see the letter K pop up. And regardless of whether we enter a lowercase version or an uppercase version, we will see our letters pop up correctly. Suha's asking after the Hangman project, can we make our own website? For sure. You know, I always encourage you guys. So far, we made a lot of projects which I've been thinking about. If you guys have any projects which you want to make specifically, a website of what I would ask, something you got in mind, maybe a game or something of that sort. Love to hear what you got to say. And feel free to post these ideas to our Google Classroom. I can always chat to you about this as well. Make our own personal website. I mean, we could definitely look into something like that. But making your own personal website does entail having to select somebody, say, type your name out, so like Suhas, whatever your last name is. That's connecting to a domain. That's a bit more complicated. And I mean, the steps are pretty similar. We use some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in order to make the project. But something definitely we can talk about as a fun fact or something of that sort next class. I like the ideas though. Keep them coming. Alrighty. Well, that concludes, guys, for this week's code. Next week, we're going to keep on working with our Hangman project, and specifically, we're going to be working on some specific features like checking if the user has won. This week, we covered the loss area, and also adding some more words which the computer can choose. So we'll add some categories like sports, shows, and then some words in those subcategories which the user can choose as well. So guys, that wraps it up for this week. Hopefully you guys had a great time with our fun fact of the day. I'll catch you guys next Monday. We have next Wednesday, I believe, for our web development course. And yeah, take care, guys. Bye.